The Celestial Accord was the pride of the Orbital Harmony Coalition, a sprawling testament to unity among hundreds of species scattered across the galaxy. With its gleaming hull and labyrinthine decks, it was more than just a starship. It was a beacon of hope, a fortress of diplomacy, and a mobile citadel bristling with cutting-edge technology. The coalition prided itself on gathering the best minds and most capable beings from every corner of the known universe. Its motto, etched into the core of its mission, was simple: only the exceptional need apply. That's why the arrival of Connor Vell, a wiry human with a cocky grin, drew more than a few raised eyebrows. But what truly stirred the ship's bustling corridors wasn't Connor himself. It was his companion. "Is that A?" Pet Commander Rauch rumbled, his deep voice resonating like the distant grind of tectonic plates. The Vurakai officer's towering frame cast a shadow over half the bridge. With 6 muscular arms crossed over his broad chest and 4 narrow eyes glinting with skepticism, he loomed over Connor and the small, furry creature at his side. "Not a pet," Connor corrected cheerfully. "This is Socks. She's my partner." The bridge crew fell silent for a moment, and then, almost as if choreographed, laughter erupted from every corner. The source of their amusement stood on 4 tiny legs. Socks, a Yorkshire Terrier so small she could have fit in one of the Coalition's ration crates, wagged her fluffy tail with unbridled enthusiasm. Her sleek black and tan fur gleamed under the bridge's fluorescent lights, and a bright pink bow adorned her head like a badge of honor. She sniffed the polished floor with interest, completely unbothered by the aliens towering around her. Core, a gelatinous Talsier engineer whose translucent body rippled with every movement, jiggled so hard from laughter that he nearly spilled out of his containment suit. That he managed to bubble out between fits of mirth. "That thing? It's tiny. What's it even for?" "Cleaning up crumbs." "She's for boosting morale," Connor replied easily, kneeling to scratch Socks behind the ears. "And tracking. She's got a nose that could make your scanners blush." A crystalline Zendarian officer, her elongated body shimmering like a column of ice, tilted her faceted head, her voice chiming with disdain. "Tracking? That speck couldn't track its own tail." Rauch let out a slow, guttural chuckle. "You brought this creature aboard my ship? Do you know what we face out here? Let me guess she's supposed to protect you from." "What, stray insects?" Socks wagged her tail harder, tilting her head at Rauch's booming voice. Then, as if in defiance, she let out a sharp bark, startling the crew into silence. Connor smirked, clearly enjoying himself. "You'd be surprised what she's capable of." Rauch's laughter deepened, turning into a growl. "Surprise me? Please. That thing wouldn't last a minute against a real threat. Here we face dangers that would crush her like a bug. And you expect us to take this trinket seriously?" Core, still wobbling with laughter, piped up again. "Maybe she's here to serve as a decoy. Distract the enemy with cuteness while the rest of us do the actual work." Connor straightened, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. "You're welcome to test that theory. I'd bet on Socks over any of you in a crisis." Rauch snorted, his green-scaled face twisting into a smirk. "Is that so? Tell me, Vel, how many life forms has this partner of yours faced? Do they cower in fear of her bark?" Connor crouched beside Socks and pointed to the towering Vurakai. "You hear that, girl? They think you're weak." Socks barked twice, her tail wagging furiously as she tilted her head at Rauch. "She doesn't look intimidated," Connor said, standing. "But I'll admit, she's not here to throw punches. Her real skill is in her nose, and in her heart." "Heart," Rauch repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'll be sure to tell the next plasma storm we encounter that we've brought a creature with plenty of heart to deal with it." The bridge erupted into laughter again, and even Captain Zorella, a regal bird like Grachan whose iridescent plumage usually radiated calm authority, allowed herself a faint chuckle. "Vel," she said, her sharp eyes gleaming, "you're bold, I'll give you that. But I suggest you keep your partner out of the way when things get serious." Connor gave a good-natured shrug. She won't be in the way. Socks pulls her weight. You'll see. See, Ralch barked. I'll see her run and hide the moment something so much as hisses at her. Socks sneezed, her tiny body bouncing slightly from the effort. Core nearly toppled over with laughter. She's allergic to danger. Clearly the Talser engineer gurgled. The taunts continued, spreading across the ship as Socks became a subject of ridicule. Crew members passing Connor in the halls smirked or made little comments. Hey Vel, need us to install a playpen for your fearless companion. Maybe the enemy will surrender out of sheer disbelief. Connor endured it all with a smile, unfazed. Socks, for her part, remained oblivious, greeting everyone with her trademark enthusiasm. When a crewmate bent down to mockingly ask, "What's your role on this ship, little one?" she responded with a playful lick to their face, leaving them sputtering in surprise. Despite the laughter, Connor never wavered in his confidence. You'll see, he'd say with a wink. She's not weak. Ralch overheard one of these exchanges and shook his head. You keep saying that, human. But if you're wrong, it'll be your responsibility when this ship faces a real challenge. Let's hope your overgrown rodent doesn't become a liability. Connor looked up from where he was attaching a small harness to Sock's back, his expression calm but sharp. When that time comes, Commander, you'll be eating your words. Ralch scoffed. We'll see who's eating what. It was only a few days later when the Celestial Accord entered the Thalos Nebula, and the crew's mockery turned to silence. The Celestial Accord drifted into the Thalos Nebula, its massive hull gliding through clouds of swirling gases painted in hues of violet and gold. The region was eerily silent, its stillness broken only by the occasional flare of energy from distant stars or the crackle of static on the ship's comm systems. The nebula had a sinister reputation. It was known for swallowing ships whole, its depths rumored to hide predators and anomalies so dangerous that even seasoned travelers avoided it. But the Coalition had little choice. Distress calls from nearby mining outposts had brought them here, each signal abruptly cutting off mid-transmission. On the bridge, Commander Ralch stared intently at the sensor readouts. His usual swagger had given way to a grim focus, his four eyes scanning the data for answers. Next to him, Captain Zarella perched in her command seat, her sharp, iridescent feathers ruffling with tension. What do we know so far? Zarella asked, her voice clipped. Ralch gestured to the display, where jagged energy spikes danced across the screen, massive energy fluctuations, movement patterns that don't match any known ship or life form, and heat signatures that shouldn't exist in this region. That's not comforting, Zarella said dryly. Core, who had been monitoring the external scans, wobbled nervously. It's almost as if the nebula itself is alive, he said, his gelatinous body trembling. Connor leaned casually against a nearby console, his arms crossed as he listened. Sock sat at his feet, her tiny ears perked up, her nose twitching with curiosity. Alive or not, Ralch growled, whatever's in here has already destroyed 2 mining outposts. We need to be prepared for anything. Connor glanced at the monitor, his expression calm. And by anything you mean you've got no idea what's out there. Ralch shot him a withering look. You're remarkably flippant for someone who brought a chew toy to a rescue mission. Connor smirked. And you're remarkably tense for someone who'll probably owe that chew toy an apology soon. Before Ralch could retort, the ship's proximity alarms blared. The lights dimmed, and the hum of the engines faltered as a low, resonating vibration filled the air. What the Zarella began, but her words were cut short as the display shifted, revealing a massive shadow moving through the nebula. The bridge fell silent as the crew stared at the screen. The shadow grew larger, its shape monstrous and undefined, like a storm cloud given sentience. Tendrils of crackling energy snaked out from its center, each one pulsating with power. Avaricor, Ralch muttered, his voice low and reverent. Core froze mid-jiggle. No, that's impossible. Varicors are myths, stories to scare hatchlings. They're real, Ralch said grimly. and if this one is awake, we're in serious trouble. The Varicor loomed closer, its tendrils lashing out like whips of pure lightning. Even on the monitor, its size was incomprehensible, easily dwarfing the celestial accord. "What's a Varicor?" Connor asked, his tone still light but with an undercurrent of curiosity. Ralch turned to him, his usual disdain replaced with genuine fear. "An apex predator. Ancient. It consumes energy any kind it can find. Ships, outposts, reactors. They're food to it. Entire fleets have been lost to a single Varicor." Connor raised an eyebrow. "So, not something you want to poke with a stick?" Ralch growled. "This isn't a time for jokes, human. We need to retreat immediately." "Retreat?" Connor asked, his tone sharpening. "What about the miners?" Ralch glared at him. "They're dead. No one survives a Varicor." "You don't know that," Connor said, his jaw tightening. "If there's even a chance someone's still out there, we can't just run." Ralch towered over him, his 6 arms flexing as his frustration boiled over. "Listen to me, Vel. This isn't one of your quaint Earth predators. That thing will tear the ship apart in seconds. Your little creature wouldn't even be a snack." Connor met his glare with quiet defiance. "She's not just a creature, she's Sox. And I'm not running until we've done everything we can to save those people." Ralch opened his mouth to respond, but a deafening crack shook the ship. The Varicor had struck, one of its massive tendrils slamming into the shields. Alarms blared as the celestial accord shuddered violently. "Shields at 70%," a technician shouted. "Evasive maneuvers," Zorella barked. The ship lurched as its thrusters fired, attempting to dodge the Varicor's attacks. Another tendril lashed out, sending a cascade of sparks through the bridge as the shields flickered. "Shields at 50%. Connor knelt beside Sox, attaching a small device to her harness. The terrier wagged her tail, her bright eyes watching him intently. Ralch noticed and barked out a laugh, though it was edged with hysteria. "Oh, this I have to see. What's the plan, Vel? Send your little beast out to bark at it." Connor didn't look up. You don't fight a Varicor head-on. You distract it. Give it something to chase. Ralch's laughter stopped abruptly. "You're serious?" Connor stood, his expression calm but resolute. "The Varicor feeds on energy, right? So we give it a target, a decoy. Something it can't resist." Zorella frowned. "And that's what you're attaching to her? A plasma beacon?" Connor nodded. "It's tuned to mimic a reactor's energy signature. Strong enough to get its attention, but small enough to keep Sox out of harm's way." "This is insanity," Ralch snapped. "You're risking everything on that tiny thing." Connor glanced at Sox, who barked eagerly. "She's faster than she looks, and she won't let us down." Ralch stared at Connor, his disbelief palpable. "If she fails." "She won't," Connor interrupted. "Trust me." The tension on the bridge was thick as Connor carried Sox to the airlock. He knelt beside her, giving her a final pat. "You've got this, girl. Just like chasing squirrels back home." Sox wagged her tail, her tiny body radiating confidence. The airlock opened and Sox leapt into the void, her propulsion harness activating with a soft hum. The plasma beacon on her back glowed brightly, pulsing with energy. On the bridge, the crew watched in stunned silence as the tiny dog zipped through the nebula, her small form weaving through the dense clouds. The Varicor hesitated for a moment, its tendrils twitching, before turning its full attention to the glowing beacon. "It's following her," Zorella said, her voice tinged with disbelief. Ralch stared at the screen, his usual confidence replaced with quiet awe. But the chase had only just begun. Sox darted through the nebula like a streak of light, her propulsion harness whirring softly as it carried her tiny body forward. Behind her, the Varicor loomed, a massive, pulsating shadow of destruction. Its tendrils lashed out, crackling with arcs of energy that sent ripples of plasma through the gaseous clouds. The ship's sensors captured the spectacle in staggering detail, projecting it onto the main display for the crew of the Celestial Accord. She's actually doing it, Kor said, his voice trembling with astonishment. It's following her. Rauch's 4 eyes were fixed on the display, his disbelief turning into something closer to reluctant awe. She's faster than I thought, he muttered, almost to himself. Connor stood with his arms crossed, his gaze steady as he watched the tiny beacon on the screen dance ahead of the colossal predator. I told you she's not weak, he said, his voice quiet but firm. The Varakor's tendrils writhed as it closed the gap, its massive form cutting through the nebula's dense plasma clouds with ease. Sox, however, seemed to anticipate every movement. She twisted sharply, diving through pockets of gas that obscured her from view. Her propulsion harness flared with short bursts of energy, propelling her in unpredictable directions that kept the Varakor from landing a direct strike. She's leading it perfectly toward the decoy zone, Zarella said, her feathers ruffling with a mix of tension and admiration. But she's cutting it close. The Varakor's closing in. Don't worry, Connor replied. She knows what she's doing. The crew remained transfixed as Sox weaved through the swirling gases. Every tendril strike from the Varakor missed her by what seemed like inches, the massive appendages tearing apart the nebula and sending shockwaves rippling across space. Her plasma beacon pulsed brighter, luring the ancient predator further away from the ship. Approaching the decoy zone, the sensor technician called out, their voice tight with nerves. Connor's hand clenched slightly at his side, but his face remained calm. Come on, girl. Almost there. The decoy, an elaborate structure bristling with emitters, hovered at the edge of the nebula. It had been deployed hours earlier, disguised within the gas clouds, waiting to be activated. Once online, the decoy would emit an energy signature strong enough to mimic a starship reactor, a feast too tempting for the Varakor to resist. Decoy is prepped and standing by, the lead engineer confirmed. Wait for Sox to clear the zone, Connor said, his voice sharp. On the display, Sox made one last sharp turn, her propulsion harness flaring as she shot past the decoy. The Varakor followed, its tendrils extending hungrily toward the glowing structure. She's clear, the technician shouted. Activate the decoy, Zarella ordered. The decoy flared to life, its emitters glowing with an intense light that bathed the nebula in shimmering waves of energy. The Varakor froze, its massive body pulsing as it turned its full attention to the new target. Its tendrils coiled around the decoy, crackling with energy as it began to feed. Decoy is holding, the engineer reported. Energy signature locked. The Varakor's fully focused on it. A cheer rippled through the bridge as the realization sank in they'd done it. Bring Sox back aboard, Zarella said, and let's get out of here before the decoy burns out. The airlock hissed open, and Sox bounded into the ship, her tiny paws clicking against the floor. Connor was waiting for her, dropping to one knee to scoop her up into his arms. She barked excitedly, wagging her tail as if she'd just completed a routine stroll through the park, rather than outmaneuvering a galactic apex predator. Good girl, Connor said, his voice soft but filled with pride. Rauch approached, his towering frame casting a shadow over them. He studied Sox for a long moment before speaking, his tone grudging but sincere. I didn't think she'd make it, but I was wrong. That creature, no, she has more courage than I thought possible. Connor smirked, rubbing Sock's ears as she panted happily. Told you she's not weak. Rauch's gaze lingered on Sox before he nodded slowly. You were right, Vel. I owe you and her an apology. Apology accepted, Connor said. But I'll expect it in writing. Rauch snorted, though there was a flicker of amusement in his expression. Zarella's voice cut through the moment. We've got a new reading from the mining outpost, she said, her feathers ruffling. It looks like there's still someone alive down there. Connor's expression hardened, his focus shifting immediately. Then let's get them. The Celestial Accord altered course, heading toward the shattered remnants of the mining station. Wreckage floated in the void, the once thriving outpost reduced to little more than scorched metal and drifting debris. The rescue shuttle departed the ship with Connor, Socks, and a small team on board. As they approached the outpost, the extent of the destruction became painfully clear. Twisted girders and fragments of machinery floated aimlessly, the aftermath of the Vericor's earlier rampage. "We're detecting faint life signs," one of the team members said, their voice barely above a whisper. Connor nodded, his jaw set. "We're getting them out." The shuttle docked with the station's ruined airlock, and the team moved cautiously into the debris-strewn corridors. Sparks arced from exposed wiring, and the stale air was heavy with the scent of scorched metal. Socks trotted ahead, her nose to the ground as she sniffed intently. She paused at a partially collapsed doorway, barking sharply. "Here," Connor said, pointing to the rubble. "She's found something." Ralch, who had begrudgingly joined the team, used two of his powerful arms to heave the debris aside, revealing a huddled figure beneath. The miner, their face pale and their uniform torn, looked up with wide, disbelieving eyes. You came back," the miner rasped. Connor helped them to their feet, supporting their weight as they moved toward the shuttle. Socks trotted alongside them, her tail wagging as if to reassure the survivor. Back aboard the Celestial Accord, the miner was rushed to medical care, and the ship powered up its engines to leave the Nebula for good. The Veracor, still fixated on the decoy, faded into the distance, its tendrils curling protectively around its newfound prize. As the stars stretched out before them, Connor sat in the observation lounge with Socks curled up in his lap. Crew members passed by, nodding in respect or murmuring words of gratitude. Even Ralch stopped by, his usual scowl replaced with a thoughtful expression. "She may be small," Ralch said, his tone unusually soft. "But she's proven she has the heart of a warrior. You were right about her." Connor smiled, scratching behind Socks' ears. "She's got more heart than most of us put together." Socks barked once, wagging her tail as if to say she agreed. The Celestial Accord sailed through the thinning edges of the Phos Nebula, its crew catching their breath after the harrowing encounter with the Veracor. Though the decoy continued to emit a steady pulse to keep the beast distracted, its activation was timed. It wouldn't hold forever. On the observation deck, Connor stood beside the expansive windows, gazing at the faint shimmer of the nebula behind them. Socks sat at his feet, her tail swishing contentedly. She had earned a moment of peace, though she still perked up whenever someone approached, her bright eyes scanning for attention. "She's acting like she didn't just outrun a galactic beast," Quor said as he slithered into the room, his gelatinous form wobbling with what could only be described as admiration. "I've never been more wrong about anything in my life." Connor crouched to pat Socks on the head. "Told you she's not weak." Ralch entered the room next, his heavy footsteps reverberating on the deck. He stood silently for a moment, his imposing frame blocking part of the window. When he finally spoke, his tone was measured, almost reverent. "Vel," he began, "I'm not one to apologize often, or easily, but I'll admit it, I misjudged you. And her." Socks barked once, a cheerful, affirming sound that made Ralch snort in surprise. "She's got more bravery than some warriors I've trained," Ralch continued. "If there's ever a battle where courage matters most, I'd want her by my side." Connor grinned. "And she'd be happy to be there, right, Socks?" Socks responded with an eager yap, her tail wagging furiously. Before the conversation could continue, the ship's comm system crackled to life. Captain Zorella's voice, calm but urgent, filled the room. "Connor Vell, Commander Ralch, report to the bridge. We've got a situation." Connor exchanged a look with Ralch, his grin fading. He scooped up Socks, who nestled comfortably in his arms as they headed for the bridge. The mood on the bridge was tense. Captain Zorella stood at the command console, her golden feathers bristling as she stared at the main display. The Veracor had moved from the decoy, its massive tendrils beginning to writhe with renewed purpose. "What's happening?" Ralch asked, his voice low. Zorella gestured to the screen. "The decoy's energy output is dropping faster than anticipated. The Veracor is losing interest." Connor frowned. How much time do we have? Minutes, the engineer replied grimly. Maybe less. Once the decoy goes dark, it'll be back on the hunt, and we're still in range. Rauch stepped forward, his voice commanding. Prepare to push the engines to maximum. We'll need to jump the moment we're out of the Nebula's interference. The engines are already at full power, Zorella replied. We won't make it out in time unless something slows the Varicor down. Connor's gaze flicked to the screen, then to Socks. She looked up at him, her head tilted, as if she already understood what he was thinking. You're not seriously considering, Rauch began, but Connor cut him off. She's the only one who can do it. Zorella's feathers flared. Connor, she's already done more than anyone could have expected. There has to be another way. Connor shook his head. The Varicor knows her beacon. She's the only one who can buy us enough time to get clear. I'll make sure she's safe. Rauch hesitated, his usually unflinching demeanor cracking. Vel, if she doesn't make it. She will, Connor said firmly. Trust me. Socks barked again, her tail wagging with determination. Connor carried her to the airlock, where he attached a second, more powerful beacon to her harness. This one pulsed with erratic energy spikes, designed to mimic the ship's signature more convincingly. You've got this, girl, Connor murmured, scratching behind her ears. One more run, and then we're out of here. Promise. Socks wagged her tail, licking his hand before stepping into the airlock. The outer doors opened, and Socks launched herself into the void. The new beacon flared brightly, drawing the Varicor's attention instantly. She's got its attention, Zorella said, her voice tight with hope and fear. On the display, Socks darted through the nebula with the same agility and determination as before, weaving through clouds and debris as the Varicor pursued her. The crew watched in stunned silence as the tiny terrier once again faced down the galaxy's most fearsome predator. Come on, Socks, Connor whispered under his breath, his fists clenched at his sides. The Varicor lashed out with its tendrils, but Socks evaded them with practiced precision. Her propulsion harness flared brightly, pushing her forward in sharp, unpredictable bursts. She led the Varicor deeper into the nebula, away from the ship. Time to jump, Connor asked, turning to Zorella. She nodded. Engines are primed. As soon as she's clear. Socks neared the edge of the nebula, her beacon still flashing brightly. The Varicor slowed, its massive form pausing as it tried to adjust to the sudden lack of plasma density. Taking advantage of the momentary hesitation, Socks veered sharply, darting back toward the ship. She's coming in hot, Rauch said, his voice edged with awe. The airlock opened just as Socks reached the ship. She shot inside, the propulsion harness deactivating as she skidded to a halt on the floor. Connor was there instantly, scooping her up and holding her close. You did it, he said, his voice thick with relief. Jumping now, Zorella called out. The celestial Accord surged forward, its engines roaring as the ship left the nebula. The Varicor remained behind, its tendrils flailing in frustration as the ship vanished into the safety of open space. On the bridge, cheers erupted as the crew realized they had escaped. Connor sat on the floor with Socks in his lap, her tiny body vibrating with excitement as she barked triumphantly. Rauch approached, looking down at them with an expression that was equal parts respect and disbelief. That little creature just saved all our lives. Twice. Connor grinned, scratching behind Socks' ears. She's a tough one. Rauch extended one of his massive hands toward Socks, who sniffed it curiously before giving it an approving lick. The commander let out a low chuckle. She's earned her place here, Rauch said, and my respect. Connor stood, holding Socks in his arms as he faced the bridge crew. You all doubted her, but I think Socks proved today that size doesn't matter. Heart does. The crew erupted into applause and Socks barked happily, her tail wagging furiously, as if she understood every word. As the ship powered down its engines and set course for its next mission, Socks curled up in Connor's lap, content and ready for whatever adventures awaited. The stars stretched out before them, vast and endless, as the Celestial Accord continued its journey through the galaxy with its smallest, bravest crew member at the heart of it all.